Queen Camilla accused a royal guard of breaking protocol and had him thrown out of Buckingham Palace in front of the entire state banquet. But this guard wasn't guilty of what she claimed, and when he finally spoke, he brought proof the palace never wanted the world to see, proof that pointed straight to Camilla's role in Diana's death. What happened next didn't just clear his name, it changed the monarchy forever. Now, before we reveal exactly what that proof was, make sure you're subscribed to our channel, Garge, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, because what you're about to discover will shake you to your core. The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace shimmered under crystal chandeliers. That January evening, 200 of the world's most powerful people gathered for a state banquet, honoring a century of diplomatic ties with France. Every gesture was calculated, every conversation capable of reshaping nations over brandy and protocol. Standing at the eastern end of the ballroom, Sergeant Major Thomas Redford embodied ceremonial perfection. At 54, his scarlet tunic was immaculate, medals aligned with mathematical precision. But his eyes marked him as different, deeper, more watchful, like someone who'd spent decades learning to see what others chose to ignore. Tonight felt different, not because of the occasion, but because of his unusual placement. Guards rarely stood inside the grand ballroom during seated dinners. His assignment had been quietly arranged without explanation. The herald's voice rang out. Her Majesty, the Queen Consort. Camilla entered on King Charles's arm, diamonds, catching light with each step. Her expression was practiced serenity until her gaze found Redford's position. Something shifted, a barely perceptible tightening around her eyes, recognition followed by what might have been fear. She leaned toward Lord Telford without breaking stride. "Remove him at once." Telford's step faltered. "Your Majesty." During the dinner, quietly, she replied, with the authority that didn't allow questions, and without seeing, two plainclothes officers approached from the side entrance. Even their deliberate casualness couldn't prevent conversations from pausing, cutlery stilling against china. "Sergeant Major," the lead officer murmured, "we'll need you to step out with us." "This isn't my scheduled relief," Redford replied neutrally. "Orders from senior protocol. Please come with us now." Redford didn't resist. His training wouldn't allow it. But as he followed them toward the corridor, whispers rose behind him. Even in a state dinner, people knew when something significant had happened. By the time he returned to his quarters in Wellington Barracks that night, the machinery was already in motion. The official statement appeared on the Buckingham Palace press feed at precisely 10:47 p.m. During this evening's diplomatic banquet, a ceremonial guard was relieved of duty following a minor protocol irregularity. "The matter is under internal review. No security concerns were present at any time." It was the kind of language designed to sound reassuring, while hinting at something more serious underneath. Within an hour, royal correspondents had begun adding their own interpretations. An anonymous palace source told one tabloid that the guard in question, a senior member of the household division, had been removed after displaying unusual behavior and failing to maintain appropriate ceremonial bearing. The morning headlines sharpened the narrative. "Security scare at palace dinner" across the Daily Chronicle. Camilla's quick thinking in the Herald. Though none named Redford directly, the description was enough. By midday, veteran message boards buzzed with disbelief from former comrades. What they didn't know was that Redford's 1997 assignment to Diana's covert security detail had placed him near events still whispered about decades later. He'd assumed that chapter was buried, but Camilla's recognition told him otherwise. 4 days later, a plain envelope slid under his door. Inside was a parliamentary summons. Committee on Historic Security Irregularities. Tuesday, 1400 hours. Palace of Westminster. Matters concerning historic royal security deployments. 1997 to 1998. Redford walked to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. The leather folio inside had moved with him through every posting for 27 years. Never opened publicly. Contained 2 items that shouldn't have survived. By noon, his decision was made. Tuesday afternoon, Westminster's rain-slick pavements led Redford to a windowless chamber where 3 MPs waited behind a curved table. He wore a dark suit, the leather folio under his arm. "Sergeant Major, you may speak freely," the committee chair said. "You've brought something for us." 2 items I was ordered to destroy in July 1990. I kept them instead. He withdrew a cream envelope worn smooth by decades of handling across the front in Diana's distinctive handwriting for Charles only. "This letter was given to me by Princess Diana on July 15, 1990, after an unannounced meeting with Camilla Parker B.S. at Kensington Palace." One of the MPs consulted his notes. "At meeting doesn't appear in any official record." "No, sir, it doesn't, and it was never meant to. My orders that night were straightforward. Maintain position outside the princess's study, until instructed otherwise." After Mrs. Parker B.S. left, the princess emerged visibly distressed, and handed me this envelope. She asked me to ensure it reached the then Prince of Wales personally. He paused, his eyes fixed on the letter that had haunted him for nearly 3 decades. The next morning, a senior palace aide intercepted me before I could complete the delivery. He informed me that the letter was a product of emotional distress and paranoia, and ordered me to destroy it immediately. Instead, I sealed it in this folio and never spoke of it again. The chair made a note. "Will you read the letter for our record?" Redford carefully extracted the folded page, handling it as though it might disintegrate at his touch. Diana's distinctive handwriting covered most of the cream paper in flowing lines that seemed to carry the weight of desperation. "If you are reading this, I pray it reaches Charles, but if not, let this serve as a record of what happened tonight in my home." His voice remained steady, but something in his bearing suggested the gravity of words that had waited decades to be spoken aloud. "She came to see me without announcement. No appointment. No security detail, no official record, just her and a driver who waited outside, while she explained how my future was going to unfold. She wasn't cruel about it, which somehow made it worse. She spoke about Charles's happiness, about the monarchy's need for stability, about how messy divorces damage the crown's reputation." The stenographer's keys clicked rapidly, capturing every word of testimony that would soon reshape British history. "She said the public would eventually accept her as queen, but only if I stepped aside gracefully. She suggested there were ways to make my departure appear voluntary, ways that would benefit everyone involved. But if I chose to fight, if I made things difficult by using the children or public sympathy as weapons." Redford paused, looking up from the letter to gauge the committee's reaction. What he saw in their faces was a mixture of fascination and growing alarm. "She said that accidents happen to people who don't understand when it's time to disappear." She said it with a smile as though discussing the weather, but her eyes were cold when she spoke those words. One MP had stopped taking notes entirely, too focused on listening to document what he was hearing. Another leaned forward, his expression grave. Redford continued reading, his voice dropping slightly as he reached Diana's final paragraphs. "I know how this must sound. Paranoid, desperate, unhinged. But I've learned to trust my instincts about people who threaten you while smiling. Tonight, looking into her eyes, I saw someone who's been planning this conversation for months, perhaps years." The room had grown so quiet that the faint hum of ventilation seemed loud by comparison. "If something happens to me, if I have an accident, or suddenly develop a desire to retreat from public life, remember this meeting. Remember that some people get what they want by making their competition disappear. And remember that not all disappearances are voluntary." Redford carefully refolded the letter and returned it to its envelope, his movements precise and respectful. She signed it with her full name and title, then sealed it immediately. The wax was still warm when she handed it to me, but it never reached Prince Charles, the chair observed. It was intercepted by staff who deemed it too dangerous to deliver. I was told that the princess was having another breakdown, and that letters like this only make situations worse. He placed the envelope back on the table, then reached into the folio again. 6 weeks later, Diana was dead in a Paris tunnel, and I realized I wasn't the only one who'd been keeping secrets about that night. The second item he withdrew was a small black cassette tape, the kind that had been obsolete for nearly 2 decades. A strip of masking tape along its edge bore 3 words in block capitals: Aug 29 late. This was given to me by a contact in MI6 2 days after the crash. He approached me during what appeared to be a chance encounter at a coffee shop near Vauxhall Bridge, slipped this into my hand and said, "You didn't get this from me." I never saw him again. The committee chair signaled to a clerk, who produced a portable cassette player and inserted the tape. For a moment there was only static and background noise. Then a woman's voice emerged from the small speaker. Calm, measured, unmistakably upper-class British. "Are you certain the escort can be delayed?" A pause. Another voice, male and indistinct, responded with words too muffled to understand clearly. The woman again. "Good. Delays will be better for all concerned. The longer route ensures flexibility." The tape clicked to silence. The entire recording lasted less than 30 seconds, but the temperature in the room seemed to have dropped several degrees. "That voice," one MP said quietly. "Have you identified it?" "I recognized it immediately," Redford replied. "The same voice I'd heard outside the princess's study in July." Camilla Parker BS discussing what sounds very much like alterations to Diana's security arrangements on the night she died. The younger MP leaned forward. "This was recorded when? August 29th. According to my contact 2 days before the Paris crash. And as we know, Diana's escort route was indeed changed multiple times that evening. Changes that placed her car in the Pont Lama tunnel at precisely the wrong moment." The chair exchanged glances with her colleagues before speaking again. "Sergeant Major, why didn't you present this evidence during the official inquest in 2004? Redford's answer came without hesitation. "Because I still believe that protecting the crown meant protecting it from all threats, including the threat of scandal. I thought my duty required silence, even when silence meant allowing lies to become official truth." He gestured toward the envelope and tape on the table between them. "But when the Queen Consort recognized me at that state dinner and had me removed, I realized that some threats to the crown come from within, and that protecting the institution sometimes means exposing the people who would corrupt it." The chair made a final note, then set down her pen. "This committee will require authenticated copies of both items. For now this session is adjourned pending further investigation." Redford stood, leaving the folio and its contents on the witness table. As he walked toward the exit, he paused at the door. "I've served the crown faithfully for 33 years, he said quietly. "But my greatest service may have been knowing when to stop protecting it from the truth." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving the committee members alone with evidence that would soon transform British history forever. For 12 hours after leaving Westminster, Thomas Redford's life remained unchanged. He walked the familiar streets back to his modest flat, made tea with the precision of military routine, and sat by the window as London's winter evening pressed against the glass. The world below continued its eternal rhythm, unaware that the foundations of the monarchy were about to shift. But the quiet didn't last. By morning his phone vibrated with messages from numbers he didn't recognize. At first he ignored them. Then a text arrived from a former comrade in the Grenadier Guards. "Tom, it's everywhere. Turn on the news." He did. And there it was. Grainy photographs of him entering Parliament.
Headlines scrolling across the bottom of news channels. His name spoken by anchors, who pronounced it with the careful precision of people handling something explosive. A BBC presenter was reading from what appeared to be leaked committee transcripts. Former Royal Guard Sergeant Major Thomas Redford has alleged in closed parliamentary testimony that Queen Camilla delivered direct threats to Princess Diana weeks before her death, and that he possesses both written and audio evidence supporting these claims. Other channels abandoned such restraint. Sky News ran the headline, "Royal Guard exposes Diana cover-up," while their American counterparts were even more direct. Smoking gun. Did Camilla plan Diana's death? By afternoon, the story had gone global. French television replayed the brief audio clip with English subtitles. American talk shows dissected Diana's handwriting. Australian programs interviewed royal experts, who struggled to explain how such evidence had stayed hidden for nearly 3 decades. Outside Buckingham Palace, small groups gathered. By evening, hundreds stood in vigil, some holding photos from Diana's charity visits, others signs reading "Justice for Diana" and "We believe you, Thomas." At 7 p.m. the palace responded, denying the leaked testimony and insisting the Queen Consort supported investigations. The statement did nothing to slow the storm. Hashtag spread worldwide. MPs demanded an inquiry and crowds grew. In his small flat, Thomas Redford kept the curtains drawn. He'd given his evidence. What happened next was beyond his control. But in Kensington Palace, Prince William had already decided inaction was impossible. Staring at the January rain, he authorized Operation Mallory, an internal investigation with powers usually reserved for national security. In a secure office beneath St. James's Palace, the team sifted through decades of records. Patterns emerged: large discretionary payments, scrubbed communications, and on the 11th day, a wire transfer, £1.9 million from a Clarence House account to a Brussels logistics firm, tied to private security contractors in France, dated 24 hours before Diana's death. A memo about escort modifications and extended delays preferable matched Redford's cassette. The findings led to a royal security tribunal in Westminster Hall. Before galleries and live cameras, Diana's letter, the audio recording, and the financial trail were laid bare. William testified, reading his mother's warning in her own handwriting. The tribunal concluded that Camilla, now Queen Consort, had used Crown resources in ways that contributed to the circumstances of Diana's death, and ordered her permanent withdrawal from public life. Outside, crowds erupted. Inside, Redford sat in silence, a 27-year burden lifting. The truth once spoken in Westminster Hall could not be buried again.